are now listening to FireWall Chats with the IT-ISAC. Today's guests are Keir Holeman, Vice President of Technical Services for Clear Ballot Group, Ed Smith, Director of Global Services and Certification for Smartmatic, and Chris Wlaschin, Vice President of System Security for Election Systems and Software. All three are members of our elections industry special interest group and join us today to continue our discussion on the SIG's work and progress since its inception 2 years ago.
Hello, and thank you for listening to the IT-ISAC FireWall Chats podcast. My name is Scott Algeier, and I'm the Executive Director of the IT-ISAC. I would like to welcome you to the second of our two-part session on election security and the work of the IT-ISAC Elections Industry Special Interest Group. Our guests today are Keir Holeman, Vice President, Technical Services, Clear Ballot Group, Ed Smith, the Director of Global Services and Certification at Smartmatic, and Chris Wlaschin, Vice President, System Security and CISO for ES&S. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Before we get going into the details, I just want to give you all the opportunity to introduce yourself and your companies. So Keir, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Sure. My name is Keir Holeman, and like you said, I'm the Vice President of Technical Services at Clear Ballot Group. We're an election tabulation company and an audit company founded in 2009, and we focus on the paper ballot.
Excellent. Thank you. Ed.
Good day, everyone, and thank you again, Scott. My name is Ed Smith. As Scott said, I'm Director of Global Services and Certification at Smartmatic, and I work in the North American region. I've been in the elections technology provision industry since 2001. Smartmatic's been in existence from the year 2000. It was founded in Florida just after the national 2000 elections that we all know so well. Smartmatic was founded to aid the security of digital transactions, has grown to be 400 employees in over 12 countries. Thank you.
Well, thank you, sir. And Chris.
Hi, everybody. Chris Wlaschin. I'm the VP of System Security and CISO at Election Systems and Software. I'm in my third year with the company. I'm also a past chair of the Elections Infrastructure Sector Coordinating Council and a current member. And I've had a couple of government senior cybersecurity jobs in 20 plus years in the U.S. Navy. Happy to be here.
Well, thank you, sir, and thank you for your service. So let's start off a little first talking about coordinated vulnerability disclosure. Right, we've been working on this for a long time. It is the focus of the podcast today. Chris, if I can ask you first, what have you learned about the importance of our coordinated vulnerability disclosure program since we started this work together about 2 years ago?
Great question, Scott. What I've learned, it's hard. Bringing an industry together to agree on a set of principles and policies that protect both researchers and industry members is vitally important to the collaboration and engagement that's needed for coordinated vulnerability disclosure. Thanks to the IT-ISAC and you, Scott, for your leadership in organizing a special interest group that brought the tabulation manufacturers together and hear how other industries have done stood up and supported coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs like the aviation industry, healthcare, and others. What I've learned is that a coordinated policy, the way that the members of the SIG or the industry act together in unison, really helps researchers understand so that they're not breaking policies in one area while trying to adhere to policies in another. Two, communications between the industry members and the research community is vital. And three, that having an outside group like an advisory council that you help form to guide those of us that maybe not are so familiar with coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs to stand up a program that's going to be successful. I'm excited about the direction that this industry is going. I'm looking forward to supporting it.
Excellent, thank you. So Keir, pretty much the same question, right? So Clear Ballot was at the table the very first day when we started this work. 2 years in, what have you learned?
Well, I've learned what a coordinated vulnerability disclosure program is, right? And it's certainly seems to be an accepted standard between companies like ours and the researchers involved. From our perspective, I think a well-defined scope is something that we think is very important, and certainly something that I've come to learn and our company has come to learn. But the program certainly demonstrates the value provided by third-party research. And it also demonstrates, as a group of companies, our willingness to take it seriously and commit to it.
Excellent, thank you. That's great. And I guess, Ed, same question to you, right? So you've been involved from the beginning, attending each of the SIG meetings, were there with us when we decided to form an advisory group. What has this process taught you and your company?
Let me speak to two things. So in these many meetings that you referenced with Department of Homeland Security and the industry providers, DHS has prioritized capacity building across the entire U.S. elections ecosystem, and CVD programs build response capacity. Today, we face threats like never before. We see foreign powers attempting to disrupt our elections, and the best way to protect small jurisdictions all the way down to each individual technology provider is to have a coordinated vulnerability program to provide communications and transparency. You know, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, and CVD is an embodiment of that, where as an industry, we've stepped up, we've moved up both as an industry and as individuals. You know, it puts into place the mission statements that many of our companies have, including Smartmatic, about enhancing the integrity of the democratic process, and that industry players who are normally fierce competitors have put aside that fierce competitive nature and spirit to cooperate and come together on CVD, as well as a number of issues, is really huge in the progress of U.S. election integrity. Building confidence is the second one. This is an age of distrust. We see misinformation, disinformation coming from all angles, and having a greater level of transparency that a CVD program brings about is very important as well. It really improves how the industry is perceived.
So that's excellent comments and feedback. So a couple of things, right? Trust, I think, is one of the focus areas we've been focusing on, right? Trust within the industry, where we get these competitors in the marketplace to work together for common good and building these programs, and also building trust with researchers, where, let's be honest, there hasn't been much trust between the researchers and the companies in this space. So maybe I'll start off with this question to you again. So what is the status of your company's program 2 years in?
So Scott, we've had some steps established even before the interaction with Department of Homeland Security, and we've taken some additional steps recently. So as the baseline, we put into place an email address, security@smartmatic.com, where interested persons can report if they feel there are security issues with our products, with our website, with our IT infrastructure, and bring those to us. Secondly, we've enhanced an already long existing incident management policy to ensure that issues taken in from that email address and portal receive equal treatment to those produced in our routine course of business and provided from internal stakeholders, so that no issue reported via the email is going to go into some kind of a black hole or something, or get lost. That to me would be as bad or worse than not even having an avenue to report, is to let something get lost once it is reported. And then we have been working with academic institutions already, and we are discussing how to broaden that set of relationships and to bring in new players and interested stakeholders into our research community.
Excellent. And so Keir, how about Clear Ballot? What's the status of your vulnerability disclosure program and the security work you've been doing?
Well, we definitely appreciate the work that has gone into creating the template for a CVD program. And we're in the process of building on that work to create our own program. We do have a growing security team at Clear Ballot. As Ed mentioned, we have a security email address, security@clearballot.com, for reporting of any issues. And that team does a lot of work to educate our entire team on security issues that are out there, everything from physical security to cybersecurity. I also want to say that we're very encouraged by the work that's being done in the public sector to implement their own programs. I live in Ohio, for instance, and the Secretary of State's office there just published their own vulnerability disclosure policy. So I think it's important to note that we are a team with our clients, and I know Ed and Chris certainly feel the same way. And I definitely wanted to mention that as part of this today as well.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. There is some excellent work with the state and local officials going on around the coordinated vulnerability disclosure as well, and it's certainly worth highlighting those. And Chris, at ES&S, you all have released your vulnerability disclosure policy, as I understand it. Can you tell us about the status of that program and where you're at?
Sure. So soon after the IT-ISAC SIG started bringing together the election technology providers, ES&S established a link on our website, security@essvote.com, where researchers or the general public could go and ask a question about election security or report a bug or a vulnerability, period. Around that time, we also stood up a vulnerability assessment team, and I think this is a key piece of any coordinated vulnerability disclosure program, is having the processes, the workflow inside the company to ingest vulnerability reports to determine the level of risk involved with fielded systems or pre-production systems, and then the ability to act on those vulnerabilities. It is true that we published our CVDP policy earlier this month, but researchers were not waiting. Hackers going to hack, researchers going to research. Those folks in that community have been using the communications channel to tell ES&S about vulnerabilities in our equipment or our corporate IT digital assets. So the policy as published is typical or comparable to other industry CVDP policies in that it provides protection to researchers if they follow the policy and conduct good faith research, and it sets expectations for what researchers can expect from industry and what the industry can expect from researchers. So I believe that our policy and our program has built upon what the IT-ISAC SIG in bringing the election tech providers together proposed to do. I'm glad to see the individual companies each taking this step, and I'm looking forward to the day when the industry as a whole has a coordinated vulnerability disclosure program that works for all.
Great, thank you, Chris. So you had mentioned the issue of trust with researchers came up again in your comments. So we have these vulnerability disclosure programs. We have ways for researchers to reach out to companies. Companies have their programs in various stages of being developed. So is this the end? Or once we have these programs in place, is that enough to sustain trust with researchers, or what else does ES&S plan to do to engage in a trusted relationship with researchers?
Well, what I've learned, Scott, is that this is a relationship, and like any relationship, it needs to be cared for and cultivated. It is true that there was resistance from industry to engage with security researchers, but that resistance has thawed, I think, through some good experience that all the election tech providers have received in their own engagements with security researchers. There's a ton of talented security researchers out there who care about elections, who care about security and transparency and auditability. And it's those folks who are stepping forward to work with industry. I don't think this is the end of that relationship building. It's going to take time to cultivate it. And I believe this is a natural step towards programmatic managed security testing that applies to all election technology providers, perhaps overseen by the Election Assistance Commission or maybe the Voting System Test Lab. Not quite sure where programmatic repetitive security testing can occur, but until we get there, I think this is a good effort to get a second set of eyes, a third set of eyes on election technology to help us, the manufacturers, make it as secure as it possibly can be.
Great, thank you, Chris. So Smartmatic and its engagement with researchers, building trust with researchers, what's the strategy within your company on how to further enhance this engagement?
I agree with Chris's comments at the end there about multiple pairs of eyes looking at the system. So we started with building an in-house security team, much as it sounds like ES&S did, where we're doing both research into security and applied security to the products in-house. So that's the place to start. And then we've moved out to where we're working with Georgia Tech Research Institute. And we found that with their broad-based set of skills, we can actually work with them in 3 areas, security being one of them, accessibility and usability being a second. And then we found as we went along in those 2 veins that having a policy element is very important. And so we've worked with their Center for Advanced Communications Policy as well. And they published a model for voting system security that we're using to help architect our systems and to help as we work with the security folks there. We plan to extend that and further publicize that model and use it as a systems model, one that can be bounced off by other researchers, those not associated with Georgia Tech Research Institute, but interested researchers there, and that can form a foundation for a relationship with interested researchers to whom we've not engaged with yet, as we look at who else we can engage with and as people come to us looking for engagement.
Well, that's really interesting. That sounds like a really neat initiative. So Keir, what's Clear Ballot? What's your engagement with the researchers?
Yeah, so our security team is currently focused on sort of our back-end process. So when we flip the switch on our program, we want to be able to address issues that come up and do it in a timely manner. So that's really what we're focused on right now. I think the ability for researchers to access current model hardware is an important, but it can be a sensitive area. There's kind of an inherent tension between the vendors and the researcher community. And I think Chris used the term breaking that ice a little bit, and I think we are, but it is a longer road. But it is certainly necessary. And a lot of times the researchers can be unvetted. We want to kind of get through that. We want to, I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that we really needed to define the scope. And I think that's an important part of this process as well. And it's certainly something that we're concentrating on.
Yeah, so that is an interesting topic for sure. And it kind of leads us to the next question, Keir, which is, although we've been doing this great work, work is not finished. So there are still gaps. So where do you see some of the gaps that we need to continue to focus on?
Well, the process for certifying updates for like software updates, for instance, is onerous. I think there's progress being made. Late last year, the EAC clarified the de minimis software changes can be possible to allow certified vendors such as ourselves to make those critical changes. That's something we've already taken advantage of, but it's still relatively untested. So it's sort of new. I also want to mention again the ability for researchers to access the current model hardware that's being used. Again, a sensitive area that we have to figure out as an industry how we handle that.
So Chris, where are some of the gaps that you see that we need to be focusing on moving forward?
Sure, I agree with Keir in that the Election Assistance Commission needs to modify their certification and testing processes to incorporate security vulnerability reports, patching, and mitigation. They have taken a step forward with recent changes to de minimis security patches and mitigations, but I would like to see them follow the model that the Food and Drug Administration developed with medical device manufacturers a couple of years ago. In a program called Post-Market Guidance, the FDA, medical device manufacturers, and security researchers came together to level the playing field and set expectations for how medical devices could be patched. Security patches that apply to the operating system and not the higher functions of the medical device could be rushed through and meet those security vulnerabilities head on in a very quick manner. The way that EAC certification and testing right now does not allow for a quick application of security patches. So once the EAC makes those modifications, and whether it occurs at a voting system test lab or a third-party security research company, once those modifications are made, I think we'll have great progress in this program.
Thank you, Chris. So the certification issue seems to be a recurring theme that I hear often. So Ed, where are some of the gaps from your perspective?
Well, Scott, you're going to keep hearing that recurring theme because my remarks reflected certification as well. I concur with Keir's and Chris's comments. I'll add a little perspective as well that, both at the federal level and at the state level, and recognizing that a few states essentially run their own program and do not utilize the federal program to any significant extent, while others use it almost entirely. States have some work to do too. The monolithic nature of federal and some state certifications just does not lend itself very well to integrating with a system provider's CVD program. Basic questions like, what if a researcher believes they found something in the system, especially if they found something significant in a fielded voting system, something with say 10,000, 20,000 units out in the field across 20 states, portions of 20 states. What's going to happen then? What if the vulnerability is confirmed? What if the technology provider, the manufacturer of the system, investigates and doesn't believe it's an issue? What if the researcher and the manufacturer don't agree? How is that gonna work out? Right now, those inevitable questions, they're going to come up. They're just not addressed very well in federal and state certification programs. So that it is going to be a problem that's going to result as CVD is adapted by more of the providers to this industry.
I think those are good comments, and we were talking earlier today before we got started about how often there are elections. I mean, there's elections, primaries going on today, for example, when we're recording this, and it's not something that just happens every other November. When these elections happen every month throughout the country, and taking machines offline to patch and have them recertified can be complicated, when you account for the fact that you don't want to be disruptive to the elections. So it does sound as though this is, there's a reason why I'm hearing this as a common theme, because it's important. So Ed, I think we'll begin with you for the final round of questions here. So what's the most important thing you have learned as we've gone through this? It's been quite a 2 years, right? We started, although coordinated vulnerability disclosure is the common practice within the IT industry, there are challenges applying it to this space that we've spoken about. So for me, there's been lots of lessons learned, but I'd be interested to hearing from each of you. And Ed, first, before we leave here, what's the most interesting thing that you've learned throughout this process?
Oh gosh, Scott, there's many interesting things, but the interrelationship between having a CVD program, how it enhances transparency, how it enhances communication, the level of cooperation that I'm seeing amongst my, as I stated earlier, fiercely competitive peers and other system providers in the industry. That's what I've seen as most important. The human element is very important. Trust is a foundation of any relationship and any forward progress, be that at home, be that in your community, and be that in something as large as the election technology provider industry. Having transparency through a CVD program, among other things, and policies that enable teaming and partnering with interested people, with researchers, is very important to that. Cooperation among the system providers, cooperation with researchers, with academia, very important, and something that, you know, as Chris pointed out, we've not seen in this industry to any degree. And in fact, hostility has been the norm, and now, you know, seeing some thawing of that, some changes, some turning over of new leaves, which are certainly needed as we work to enhance the technology that our voters are using, both in November 2020 and beyond. You know, R&D in this industry always continues, and with that, new technologies emerge, new vulnerabilities emerge, and CVD programs are a nice way to keep those tamped down, and once again to communicate their existence and, importantly, their remediation. So I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Scott.
So you are welcome, Ed. I appreciate that. So before we go, you mentioned communications and letting people know that about your policies. So if people were interested in finding learning more about your security program, if where can they go, or where should they go?
We have some information right now on our website, smartmatic.com, and we'll be publishing more as the enhanced incident management policy is also updated, and ultimately we'll publish that to the web.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, sir. Chris, maybe we'll go to you next. What's the most important lesson that you've learned, and where can people go to learn more about your programs?
Sure. My vision for coordinated vulnerability disclosure programs for the election industry are to evolve into the kind of relationship that the four of us have all seen at various security conferences, where the automotive industry is embracing this security researcher community and they work collaboratively together. The medical device industry has a warm relationship with the security research community, and they work very well, very effectively together. I would like to see that is how the CVDP for elections technology providers goes. One that is collaborative, one that's mutually supportive, one that respects the boundaries and the requirements of election technology in the field versus that's being maybe in development. And one quick point, I'd really like researchers to get involved in the early phases of development. The four of us and the people who listen to this podcast are security professionals, and you know, the earlier you involve security research, security testing in a product development, whether it's hardware or software, the earlier you involve that research and you're able to fix vulnerabilities or issues that are found, always benefits the end product much better. Much harder to fix security gaps after the thing's been built and fielded. So I hope that we can get security researchers involved earlier in the product development process. And thanks again for bringing us together, Scott.
Yeah, you are welcome, Chris. Thank you. And before we go, from your end, where can people go on your website to learn more about your work?
Sure, they can go to essvote.com, click on the security tab, and there's a lot of information on that webpage, including our CVDP policy and how to reach us.
Great, thank you. And Keir, from Clear Ballot Group's perspective, your perspective, what's the biggest lessons learned, and where can people go to learn more about your security program?
Well, you know, Chris started off the podcast by saying out loud that this is hard, and it is. There's so much that goes into it. We have multiple people working full-time on our security program and involving every single one of our employees, many employees who hadn't thought much about security, before. So that's certainly something that we're working on every day. And, it's all about bringing trust to the industry. And I think an even better word is confidence. I think all of us on this podcast, our goal is for people in our country and in the places we do business all over the globe have confidence in their systems. And I think that's our end goal. I think that's everybody's end goal. And I think the CVD program will certainly help with that. You can find information about Clear Ballot at clearballot.com, and we are just about to post a brand new page connected to that, our security information, and we'll eventually be posting our CVD program there as well. So.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I just want to let our listeners know that on the IT-ISAC website, on the Special Interest Group page, we do have a dedicated page for the elections industry Special Interest Group. And we will be publishing links to the CVD policies published by our members as they're released as well. So we're trying to provide a forum for people to find the information easily, and we're happy to assist with that. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you for the work you're doing on not just behalf of your companies, but on behalf of the people who go vote. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you for listening to this episode of FireWall Chats. For more information about this special interest group, please visit www.it-isac.org.